hosting currently?
At the same time, outside. They're just constantly spawning. And because of the memory leak, I had to save and like kill, 15 or 20 of them, and then the game would crash. And I could reload and kill like another 15 or 20 enemies before the memory would fill and the game would crash again. And I think I went through like 20 saves in order to clear out 2 of the castles and had like 1 or 2 left, and I was just like, no, fuck this. How you doing, Raven? Welcome to the stream. Always good to see you. Give it just a minute more.
Oh, hey, we have quality settings. Apparently, as soon as you hit affiliate, you get quality settings.
Excellent.
Nice.
We are moving up in the world. It's a good day.
Yeah.
Showcasing another one of my perfect shirts for the occasion.
Yeah, very appropriate.
All right. Yeah, slowly but surely, a nice constant upward climb. So I believe this is our, you like this shirt? Excellent. I thought it was fitting for me.
Literally and metaphorically.
Yes. Yeah, it actually fits quite well too. I like it. It's comfy. Nice material. I recommend TeePublic. Great place.
Yeah, TeePublic has great shirts.
With indie designers. Support the community. Fitting is a weak word for me. Excellent. Excellent. All right. Game tuning and difficulties. A much more light, a much more fun topic, and a topic that was actually inspired by the recent release of Star Wars Jedi.
Fallen Order.
Fallen Order. Yes.
Full title. It's a decent game. It gets its full title.
Yes, it does. It deserves the full title. And we're gonna, we love to do lists. Let's make a list. Star Wars. As soon as I remember how to type.
That font size got to go way up.
Yep. A whole lot of stuff got to go way up.
Yeah, I enjoyed Fallen Order quite a bit. It's a studio that I really enjoy, but that doesn't necessarily mean that all of their games are going to be great. I'm glad that EA gave them enough freedom to actually make a game that they want to make, and it turned out well.
They've also never really done a Souls-like action fine-tuned sort of, most of the stuff I've seen them do well so far have been shooter games.
Oh yeah,
that
they're
style.
Excellent at shooters.
Yeah, so I gave them some credit. I figured they'd probably be pretty good because shooters require a lot of tight tuning and tight timings and stuff like that. I knew it wasn't going to be a FromSoft game. It's not going to be a Souls game. They haven't had the experience. They haven't had the background. They haven't had the... You can't expect them out of the gate to do what the masters do. Bottom line. That combat system takes a lot of work and effort. But they did good.
Huge amount of effort.
But that's way outside of what this is. This is literally just looking at what they did with their difficulty tuning. Those very first bars. Let's get a couple other lists over here. We'll have some good mechanics. And bad mechanics. Pseudo, have you had much chance to play Fallen Order?
No, I haven't touched it all yet.
Have you gotten to see it?
Yeah, I've been watching your streams.
Excellent, excellent. I'll let Rage jump in first since he's actually played it. There's supposed to be a gap between difficulties, but I thought it was fairly smooth. It's just that one, it's not so much a gap, it's poor tuning in general, creating a, yeah, the parry thing is what we're talking about. It's just poor tuning in general on the parry, making for a really unnatural feel. I think if they had turned it up just a little bit more, or even maybe moved it a little further in, it would have been good.
Oh yeah, it was very close to being right. They just went a little too far. But before we like really start digging into this, we should probably do the intro.
Oh, well, that's a good idea. Hi, welcome to Games by Design. As always, I am Deus.
I am Rage.
And I'm Pseudo.
And as I've already talked about, we are doing game tuning and difficulties. It is a game design session. So let's talk about game design, and let's talk about what makes a game well designed, poorly designed, and come up with some good examples.
And for anybody who isn't that familiar of the process of difficulty tuning and setting up games and what makes them difficult, what makes them easy, this is a process that generally takes a very long time during game development, making sure that your difficulties are tuned correctly, especially if you're doing more than one. And it's a process that involves setting up animation timings. It's about damage values. It's about enemy health values. It's about player health values. It's about, damage values on the player as well as the enemies. All sorts of things go into this, figuring out where iframes or invincibility frames are in dodge animations. If you're going to have iframes in your dodge animation, all sorts of stuff like that. And it's something that can be done extremely well by studios that have a lot of experience doing it, and it's something that can be done fairly poorly by studios that don't. And it's something that applies to all sorts of games. It's not necessarily just 3D action games like Jedi Fallen Order. It's also applicable to shooters. It's also applicable to MMOs. It's also applicable to platformers, RTS, you name a genre.
RTS is one of my favorites to tackle difficulty in. Looking forward to talking about that one.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting stuff to cover under RTS.
But let's start with Jedi, because people have been watching it, people have been seeing it. Yeah, so much math. It's mostly linear algebra. Mostly.
But so for one of the first points I'd like to make about Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order is that overall the combat system is great. I really liked it. And there are a few things that I disagree with. But generally I thought the tuning was pretty good up until you hit Jedi Grandmaster difficulty, which is where it all kind of falls apart. And it's simply because of the parry window tuning in Grandmaster. That's the only reason I didn't like Grandmaster.
But we are going to put it under good mechanics still, because moving your parry window around is a great way to adjust difficulty in a game.
Yeah, for sure. And it's something that we've seen in the Souls series. Say that 10 times fast. As well, in so much as in Dark Souls 2 and 3, they started tuning your parry window based on what kind of shield you're using. Whereas in Dark Souls 1, there was only two different parry windows. There was one for using a shield and one for using a small shield or parrying weapon, which was a much larger window to make it easier to parry.
So I'm actually going to put health tuning under good mechanic as well, and enemy health. But it can become a bad thing. Just like the parry window, it can become a bad thing. I'm going to use Jedi as an example. The health has gone up as the difficulty went up, but they still never attained bullet sponge level. I mean, easy they die in one hit, hard they die in three, kind of idea. Where I am, the hard ones die in 2 hits.
I felt like it was very well handled.
Yes. Pseudo, is there anything you noticed on the difficulty tuning of the game while I was playing? I know you haven't gotten to play it yourself, but
Not too much. It's kind of hard to see from like a audience perspective because we don't really know too much about like control scheme, what's really going into it. Just watching it, it seemed like when I joined in, you've already been playing for a bit, so nothing was really giving you that much trouble.
I probably already turned the difficulty down then.
It's possible. I was watching at one part. The guy with the rockets and then the dog thing shooting you. I know that I realized in getting by there, and then it would reset you all the way back. I don't know if they do it. Do they adjust checkpoint length depending on difficulty, or is that
They
a different?
don't, but that's a great idea.
Yeah,
that's for
I know a few games that do that. That's like from difficult games that I have played personally. Like I want to be the guy. That's how their difficulty works. Is they just cut down on the checkpoints.
So you have to go farther without dying.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a fantastic way to do it. The game's not harder, you just have to be better.
There's another good mechanic that I would like to include that is enemy AI tuning. For instance, the enemies in Jedi Fallen Order again would often change their attacking strategies based on difficulty.
Yeah.
On the easier difficulties, if you are in the middle of engaging another enemy, they will generally leave you alone. But if you're on one of the higher difficulties, they have no problem with just coming up and trying to kill you while you're engaging a different enemy.
Yeah, the game slider called it enemy aggression. But yeah, it's what AI is being loaded for the enemy base. Or a value passed into the AI, either or.
Yeah, I thought that was very well handled.
That's also the number one way to address your FPS. I mean, really, enemy AI. Let's put enemy AI just at the top of the list. This isn't in any order, except for enemy AI, because
which needs to be at the top.
Yeah, at the end of the day, the AI is the number one way for you developers to make your games harder. Don't fuck with everything else. Let the enemies die in 2 or 3 hits all the time. Just make them that much harder to kill. Make them do more damage to us. That's not a bad way. We can make less mistakes to get through the game, but everything still feels killable. We don't want bullet sponge.
Another way I've seen avoiding bullet sponginess be done, and it can be a good or a bad way to tune it, is with enemy amounts rather than adding more HPs to a specific enemy.
Yeah, I'm fine with maybe a boss kind of idea. Make the boss do more, have more, take longer to kill, which is it actually brings up a really interesting point that I was talking about at one point with Riftkick, where in a study done with people, the number one change to enemies to the average gamer that doesn't know anything about game design or how games should be played or made or all that fun stuff was more health on the enemy. Made the AI seem more believable, more real, better. And that's mainly due to the fact that if enemies are too easy to kill, like if it's really like 1 or 2 hits and you've got a gun and you're in there and bang bang and they're gone, then you'll never actually really see what the AI does.
Yeah, which is a very valid point. And there is definitely a happy medium to be found in those sorts of situations. Like, sure, bang bang, they die. That doesn't feel super great, but it does give you a bit of a power fantasy for if you're fighting like weaker enemies. Like, for instance, again in Fallen Order, when you first get your lightsaber back and you're 1 and 2 shotting everything, all those stormtroopers after that, it feels great. That feels wonderful. But you wouldn't want the entire game to be like that. And Crucy brings up a very good point. weak spot mechanics. That is a great way to deal with difficulty tuning.
Yep.
In as much as like a glowy red location that you can hit on the enemy to deal extra damage, or removing armor in order to deal more damage.
Yeah, for sure. That's what you made me think of when you were talking about that. Came right to mind.
Yeah, sometimes you're just not ready.
Yeah, weak spot mechanics. Thank you very much for the follow, Jaggernaut. Welcome to the stream. Hope you enjoy. Feel free to throw out your own recommendations. Let us know what you think. 24.
Actually, I think which one was it? One of the Resident Evils I remember did it really, really well, where on lower difficulty levels there were actually more weak points. They were easier to find, they were easier to hit, but some of them would be deactivated on higher difficulties, and I thought that was really well handled.
Yeah, I like that idea, deactivating some. I also like the idea of highlighting them on lower difficulties. Like for an FPS, a glowing spot on the enemy is much harder to pick up and spot and shoot than just a spot that is slightly subcolored, or even the same color and just it's a weak spot.
And the usage of color can be somewhat problematic as well. Just for people who have sight disabilities, like people who are colorblind, people who are, all of the various different ways of being colorblind or color deficient. So it's something that's definitely a good way for the vast majority of gamers, but you do have to be careful with.
Yeah, that's a very good point. So the final thing I want to dig into a little bit on Star Wars Jedi before we move on to another game is the parry window. Specifically, when we're talking about parry window, so for those that have been watching me play that, as the enemy is coming in to attack and swinging, I have to be holding the button at a certain time before he hits me. So on the Grandmaster, it's like they have this long, slow wind up and then quick forward motion, and it's only in the last little bit of that forward motion that you have to hit the button. So you're looking at, microseconds that you have to hit that button really quickly. So you have to be very intimately familiar with those animations in order to pull that off. On the Master difficulty, which is what we really recommend people playing for your first playthrough, unless you need the lower levels, but if you like a challenge, that higher difficulty, it's more right as that swing is starting to come forward. In that section, then I can hold the button. And I'm going to get the parry and the Master one. And it allows for a much more intuitive and interactive combat with the game. It just makes it so much more fluid and smooth and enjoyable, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, I started playing on Grandmaster initially as well, like I know you did, Deus.
Yep.
And anytime I tried to parry anything, I would get it like maybe 1 or 2 times out of 10. Most of the times it would be a big enemy and it would just one-shot me after that for paying for that missed parry. And once I turned it down to Jedi Master, my eyes just lit up. It was just like, oh, this is how this game is supposed to feel. This is so much better. This parry system feels amazing. And honestly, I don't think I'm going to go back and play that game on Jedi Grandmaster just because of the parry window.
Yeah, it just doesn't feel enjoyable. The only time I see that Grandmaster being applicable is if you love that game and you've already finished it on Master like 10 times and you know the animation so well that it's just too easy and you want to jack up the difficulty. I think it would have made it a good New Game Plus for the game.
Yeah, maybe unlock only in New Game Plus, or frankly, I think even on a first playthrough, the enemy aggression and enemy damage was tuned really well. Like there are a bunch of things that one-shot you, but they're manageable.
Yeah, you can see them coming.
There's a lot of telegraphing, but just increasing that parry window to be double whatever the tiny value that it is would would have made it great. Would have been fantastic.
Yeah, the direct parallel is Dark Souls 2, Dark Souls 3, or Dark Souls 1, Dark Souls 2. New game plus,
How
like
so?
the completion. Grandmaster or Jedi Master feels a lot like Dark Souls 1. The parry timing. Very intuitive, very easy to follow. Like once you understand it, you can easily figure out where it's going to be. All right, let me know if he becomes an issue. I've got it up. I can see it. Don't worry about it, Lo. But yeah, sorry. Where was I?
I don't know. You were talking about Dark Souls 1 versus Dark Souls 2 in relation to how Jedi does
Master and Grandmaster, that's what it felt like to me. Yeah, so everybody really loved the parrying in Dark Souls 1. It was one of the adored things about the game. It was one of the funnest ways to play through it. It was one of the greatest mechanics in the game. And then they wanted to make it harder because they thought it was too easy. And Dark Souls was all about being difficult at that point. So Dark Souls 2 fucked with the windows, shortened them up, made them really unintelligible. I got killed over and over again trying to figure out the parry window at the very beginning of the game. And then I just went, screw it, I'll roll through it. And that was the rest of the game.
Yeah, and I was also urging you to do best build, which is dual wielding great swords and just roll through and then thwomp everything dies in one hit.
Which I did.
Which is, is maybe not the best way to experience the game, but damn, is it ever silly.
It was silly. I wasn't a big fan of the slow speed of them. Not really my style, so I didn't end up finishing some of the expansions, but I still rolled through the game.
Yeah, I believe you stopped on the ice DLC. I can't remember which one the name is.
Yeah.
But that I would say is probably my least favorite of the DLCs for Dark Souls 2 as well, so I don't blame you.
Yeah. Okay. Pseudo. What game would you like to throw up on the list as an example of either good or bad? Unless somebody else in the audience has one that we've played. We have to actually know the mechanics to talk about it. But we're open to suggestions as well.
If we want bad, we can talk about, the whole now I'm hungry and thirsty.
Oh, that's a nice new example too. Yeah. And I love this game. Okay, I love this game, but I do have to put it on difficulty done poorly.
Yeah. My gripe with that stuff like that is that the mechanic itself shouldn't be a difficulty.
It should be a toggle.
Not just that, but it could be a toggle. But it should be something that's just in the game, and difficulty affects that. But it's weird just to kind of put it behind like a difficulty wall, because I didn't even know it was in the game because I was just playing on the one difficulty, like, oh, apparently this is a thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, it should be that it's just there. You can turn it off if you want, but it's still there for the earlier difficulties. It's just that the amount that you'll get hungry or thirsty is just more realistic on the higher difficulties rather than the lower ones. But when you give them that possibility, it's just well, no one's gonna do that because there's not really that much of a reward for it unless they incorporate it into the game properly.
Yeah.
It just feels like a weird afterthought.
My biggest problem with it is I actually really liked the enemy difficulty on Supernova. And I even like the hardcore aspect of not being able to save. I usually play games on Iron Man, hardcore mode, whatever, because I have that personality where if I don't do it perfectly the first time, reload until I've mastered that little section. If it saves for me as I go, I find the game a much more organic experience. I learn to connect with the characters more. I care about them. I worry about them when they go get themselves into combat because I don't want to lose them. It's a different experience. But the eating and drinking was just so monotonous. 5 steps, take a swig. 5 steps, take a swig. 5 steps, take a swig. Every other minute of playing the game, it felt like I was either hungry or thirsty, or I'm tired and I've got to go sleep or I die.
Yeah, it could have been done a bit better as an actual mechanic if it was built into the game properly. You would have to pick your rations before you go out and leave the ship, kind of plan out where you're going to be camping because you're going to sleep and get tired and stuff like that, and do it that way. Not just there's just some value that goes down and now you've got some inconvenient thing that you got to click on a button. It's not really interactive in the game at all. It's just kind of now being inconvenienced by a stat.
Yeah. Your stats just start going down.
And the way that it was handled in that game, as Deus has said, really does feel like an afterthought, and it's something that there are a lot of people who care about. People do care about survival mechanics in their games, and it's something that could have been incorporated better. It could have been a toggle on every difficulty. They could have spent more time on it. And the alternative that they've gone for is just making a difficulty mode that nobody's going to be satisfied with. The hardcore people aren't going to be into the difficulty of, well, the added added tedium of having to drink and sleep. And
Yep.
the survival people don't necessarily want their enemies to be that hard. They might want to play on medium difficulty and have survival mechanics.
And they were quite tough on that difficulty. Like, you had to really try. You had to pay attention. You had to sneak when you're going to sneak, and you wanted your weapon to be doing good damage all the time. That part I really liked. So sad. Fantastic game, though. Play it. Writing is superb. I laughed my ass off the whole time. Whole time. And it's a beautiful, beautiful little view into what corporate culture is moving towards in the future.
Yeah, the satire of potentially where capitalism is headed is fantastic in that game.
Remember to pay your gravesite fees.
Yeah. And remember, if you work hard enough, you won't get sick.
Because apparently that's how things work.
I'm adding it under bad mechanics and putting question marks on it because it's, why would you use this as a difficulty mechanic? It's not a difficulty mechanic, it's a game mechanic.
I think if somebody hops into the middle of our stream, they're going to take issue with that, and I would not disagree with them. But I do think as a difficulty mechanic, it is definitely not a good one.
There we go.
Yeah,
no one can complain.
Well, I mean, they shouldn't, but they probably will.
Yeah, I mean, you can't please everybody. I get that. That's fine. That's what the ban button's for. Get out of here. Raven, any games that we would know of yours that you think had interesting difficulty tuning? Now that we've been talking about it some? Or just one that you'd like to hear our opinion on? Or Cruci? I know you've played a ton of games. Yeah, just throw one out when you get it, and we'll add it to the list. Until then, I've put one up, Pseudo's put one up, so Rage, what's your pick?
I would actually have to say a game that has elements of both good and bad. Actually, have you guys played Fury? Furi?
Nope, seen a lot of it.
Well, it has some stuff that I would like to talk about because it takes a lot of influence from older boss rush style games and has a very punishing but fair approach to game difficulty.
Okay.
Because Fury actually does have multiple difficulty levels.
Am I putting it under good, bad, or both?
Fury, I would say is definitely under well done.
Okay.
It does have, increased enemy damage, decreased player damage on higher difficulties. It has a very hard to master, easy to learn parrying system that can be quite different to actually nail the boss attacks with. And it's an example of a game where the difficulty of the boss fight, because it is so focused on the boss fight and the mechanics therein, is a real selling point of the game. And I like, because it is a boss rush, the focus on each individual mechanic in each boss fight being so different from all the other mechanics and yet needing to be so polished because it's going to be a front and center focal point of the game was just extremely well handled.
Awesome. I haven't played it myself, so. Pseudo, did you play any Fury?
No, I haven't, but I'm watching some gameplay right now. Interesting.
So, what would you call the good difficulty mechanic tunings? Are they already up there? Parry window, basically?
Most of them are up there, but I would say the good difficulty mechanic being varied boss mechanics that are tied to the player's ability to deal with them. Uh, as a explanation of what I mean here,
Yeah.
there will often be sections of the game that are essentially bullet hells. There's just a whole bunch of projectiles on the screen, and you have to, either dodge them or deflect them with your parry, or you can shoot them down with your gun. But sometimes some of those projectiles uh, are unbreakable. They are not. You can't parry them. You can't shoot them. You can't, block them. You just have to dodge. And the number of unbreakable projectiles on higher difficulties increases.
Okay.
So the boss mechanic itself is tuned to a higher difficulty rather than, some potentially you could look at it as lazier ways of dealing with that, e.g., increasing damage or increasing boss health.
Yeah, it's just they change the ways you have. We can say more unavoidable damage.
But it's
Not
not
unavoidable.
There is
more
there is
unblockable.
there is no bullshit in
Yeah.
Fury.
Yeah.
Fury is very well tuned.
More unavoidable would be bad. I agree. Depending on the design.
I don't know what term I would use to describe that.
Yeah, I love the mechanic. I do like the design of it, but it's essentially just a redesign of the boss's mechanic.
I would say like maybe mechanic tuning. I don't know.
Less avoidance options? You're saying basically you're taking away the ability to block and taking away the easier or more countering style avoidances and forcing the player into a more of a dodge and an actual avoidance situation.
Yeah, I guess avoidance tuning. I guess. I have a hard time describing it, but I really love the mechanic.
I think that's the best way I can put it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess that sort of fits into our points about Fallen Order as well, in that in the higher difficulties, the enemies were definitely more willing to use their red unblockable.
Yeah, force you to dodge, roll, use the iframes. Ah, there's one that's not up there. Adjusted iframes. Though I can't think of a game that actually does it.
Well, I mean, other than Dark Souls 2.
That's not really difficulty tuning, though. That was...
No, it was just a very poor design system.
Yeah, Pseudo. Can you think of a game that actually adjusts the iframes in your roll as a difficulty tuning? Because it's an amazing way to do it. Make your rolls have to be tighter.
I think that would really annoy me, especially if I had played the other difficulties first.
Yeah, I don't know, because you'd get used to it, right? It would kind of throw you off. Isn't it kind of similar to the parry window?
It is similar to the parry window, and the parry window is a good thing, forcing you to be tighter on it. You know, if you only get the first loop of your roll, or the first half of it, rather than the whole thing as an iframe later on. I mean, attacks have to be tuned right. You can't have those BS attacks that required the whole roll to get out of, and then you only get half of that. Or you have to consider your positioning and footing a little bit more on the enemies. I think the bottom line is you don't like difficulties on games like, which I don't disagree with.
Yeah,
I don't really like having
would say
difficulties
that
on games like that either. But
I would say that having a difficulty level slider on Dark Souls would ruin it.
oh, 100%. People want them to put an easy mode in for Sekiro. No, no. Get good. You can do it. You'll feel better if you beat it on hard. It's an accomplishment. You get the heart pumping, you get the adrenaline flowing through every bit of your body, your palms are sweating. Yeah, that's exactly what I was just talking about.
Mean, Raven.
But I do think that for, but as a caveat, okay, adjusting the iframes, but as a design, you would have to start with the hardest difficulty tuning and then extend the iframes from there. Not start in the middle and reduce the iframes for the harder difficulty. And that's probably the issue that most people would have there.
Yeah, I think that...
Let's call that tune for hard.
Yeah, for sure. And it's something that, like, conceptually, a lot of developers know, much like in my world of building UIs, that we know that we should start with mobile. That should be the first UI we design and then move upwards from there. But it is often not the way that it actually happens.
Well, I think a lot of developers probably, and here's the problem. The developers and the game designers are guided and led by the money managers, right? Vector-based games are cool, such as top-down attacks or waiting until the boss bends over for your strike. Yep. That's a lot about animation states when you're dealing with that kind of stuff. Once the boss has done his swing animation state and is in his recovery animation state, you have a window of attack. That is the safe part, where he cannot ready a new attack and hit you. There you go. I've just broken Soulsborne games for you all. Go and hit the bosses in their recovery state, and you'll be fine.
Well, I mean, the first rule of Souls games is hit him in the butt.
Yep. Well, the first rule is get behind him. Second rule is hit him with a stick.
I feel like you're just breaking down the first rule into two pieces.
Yeah, well, I'm used to dealing with the public. We saw God of War 2. I know you were a big God of War fan, Rage. You play it on any different difficulties?
Yeah. God of War, I think I only played through on hard. I didn't actually play on the godlike difficulties, but it was definitely a game that utilized a lot of the mechanics that we've already talked about. The quick time events would be, shorter, just give you less of a window to hit the button. The enemy health would be larger. Your parry window would be a bit tighter.
Enemy, so it's parry window, enemy damage, adjusted iframes, enemy health. Was it too much enemy health?
No, it wasn't offensive. Not like the new God of War. The new God of War's highest difficulty, everything is just way too damage spondy.
I mean, in all my thinking right now, maybe you can address the God of War 3 skin-based difficulties as well. You're our GOW expert here. But
you wanted me to do that now, or are you gonna finish your thought?
Yeah, I can finish my thought. It is kind of I'm just thinking about different games that I know of and or hated the difficulty tuning for, and everything that's coming to mind is just everything got bullet spongy.
Well, we could talk a little bit about Borderlands and how Borderlands 3 has handled higher difficulty levels, which I think is questionable in a lot of ways.
Sure.
But first, I'll just make a point on the skin-based difficulties.
Sure. I'm gonna grab
I thought
some
that
water.
was a really cool way of unlocking difficulties. I thought it was really neat. Like, it was a way to, if you beat the game and did certain things within your playthrough, you would unlock the ability to have either a higher or a lower difficulty based on the skin that you're using. And I think that that was a really interesting way to handle accessing different difficulties. Much like in Metal Gear Rising, if you unlock certain wigs by getting enough of the collectibles, you could have infinite energy. So you could always use your Ripper mode or your Zandatsu, basically your super mode, or you could have infinite ammo for your sub weapons, stuff like that. And it's all based on in-game accomplishments, which is a great way of doing it.
So you're unlocking higher difficulties, basically.
But not necessarily by beating the game. Like in Metal Gear Rising, for instance, you can unlock the infinite ammo wig within your first playthrough if you know what you're doing, and you get it about halfway through the game. So your sub weapons just have infinite ammo at that point, and you can choose to use it or not.
Is that really a difficulty tuning though? Because you have to actually be decently good or have a decent amount of knowledge to unlock it.
No, it teaches you all of the mechanics that you need to unlock it on your first playthrough. You don't need to have beaten the game before.
That's interesting. I do enjoy it, but I you do still have to accomplish certain things to make it easy. I don't know if I'd put it directly under difficulty. Well, I guess difficulty tuning is a more general term, affecting the difficulty of a game at all. It was a really interesting conversation when I was on a Zeus stream, where we were all talking about there being actually difficulties in Dark Souls and Bloodborne. You have to have a little bit of knowledge about the game, but you could play sorcery. That's an easy mode right there. You can spend all your points on Vit at the very beginning of the game until you have 35. You'll be fine.
And you just have so much health that it doesn't matter how many times you get hit.
Yep. I mean, you still have to learn the boss, but it's much easier to learn the boss because you can get hit by that attack 3 times instead of it hitting you once and you dying. So yeah, Vit's easy mode, and your damage comes from your weapon plus, so you're not even really losing much damage. As long as you can pick up your weapon, you're good to go.
You get your weapon, you get your weapon upgrades, you get your gems, and you're good to go in Bloodborne.
Yep. Oh, Bloodborne Vit mode is even more easy mode. You get 35 Vit in Bloodborne. You can just spam R1 through most of the attacks. You'll come out on top because you're recovering your health every time you hit the guy. So, you know, there are difficulties still to those games if you're having a really hard time playing through one. There are mechanics within the game to allow you to find aid, to seek help, to make things easier. You can summon NPCs. You can summon PCs. You can summon a friend who knows what the fuck he's doing. You can summon me. I'll help you.
It'd be great fun. Actually, we should do some co-op Souls one of these days.
Yeah.
Maybe on stream.
Yeah, definitely. Let's do up some co-op, and once we get some people in here, let's do a help session where people can just get help if they want.
Yeah, that'd be great. Ooh, Guitar Hero. That's an interesting game to talk about.
That is an interesting game.
As a musician, I found the easy difficulties on Guitar Hero incredibly difficult. So hard. And if I played through a song the first time on Expert, I was way more likely to do well. Like way more likely.
I know. I wanted to play all the notes they didn't want me to play.
Just absolutely drove me nuts.
But at the same time, I think the difficulty tuning was still well done.
Yeah, I think for non-musicians, it was great because they were very much just reacting to what they were seeing on the screen, and it felt really good for a lot of people.
Did I just replace that whole thing with needed?
I think you did.
I don't know how I did that, but that was awesome. Yeah, we only played on it expert by the end of it. Hard is like a little warm up, and then we're all expert. Pookie was a beast on Guitar Hero. an absolute beast. She is the only person I have seen do Rush on Expert. And when she was in a room full of guitar people and Guitar Hero players and did it, everyone was like,
See, now I want to see this. I haven't seen her play Guitar Hero yet. That's
"Oh,
gotta happen.
she's real rusty. She's real rusty, but we'll do it. Come on by and we'll do up some Guitar Hero together. That'd be fun." I'm gonna put it on good. Guitar Hero.
Yeah, I think overall it was really well done.
And a fantastic game. Has a really, really cool story about its origins. You can dig into that sometime. You haven't played it since you were 20. What, like a year or two?
All you young'uns. Oh, you're my age, Raven. Congratulations. You're the best age.
Yeah, I'm the old one here. You can tell by all the gray hairs. The missing hairs.
What? I haven't got any. You wouldn't be able to tell anyway.
Yeah, I know you're getting up there. I've known Crucy forever. I've known that guy longer than anybody, so everybody say a nice hi to Crucy. Maybe we'll get him in this. Maybe we'll get him in the stream someday and teach us a little bit about League. We can listen to him yell and scream and be that classic League player. Hilarious. He's gotten much better. Welcome, Corvus. Any games you'd like to see on the list? Welcome to the chat.
We're going over game tuning as far as difficulty goes and how that can really impact your experience.
I'm just going to throw some up real quick on the poor list as we go. We don't necessarily have to talk about them all. You're getting combobulated. What's combobulating you? It's a great word, by the way. I love combobulation.
I've remembered the game that I was going to say. And it's, in a lot of ways, a very well-tuned game. But once you hit end game, it all falls apart, and it is Borderlands 3.
A newer one, yes. I also wanted to put up here a classic, terrible fail on Enemy Sponge. I didn't even have to play it. I just read a little bit about it, and I was like, wow, that's terrible. Watched a little bit of gameplay. Yeah. 20 headshots is too much, game developers. Things die when you shoot them in the head. Twice. Once,
Not
usually.
In that game, they don't.
20? 20 too much. Don't make me shoot something in the head 20 times. It doesn't feel right. Actually, one of the few FPS that I got into and liked on multiplayer was 007 GoldenEye because of the License to Kill mode. I felt that was great.
Grand.
That was my favorite way to play. Pistols and License to Kill. That made a great FPS experience. I don't like... I see things, and then I get the first shot off, maybe the second shot off, but then I get excited and, like, you know, move my cursor and start missing them, and they hit the next 3 or 4 shots, and I die first. Pisses me off all the time. I hit them first, they should die. I already shot them in the head. Go down. It did not age well at all, but none of those really early FPSs aged very well, except for Doom.
No, I was about to say, I disagree. The early Doom and Wolfenstein games are wonderful still.
Yeah. But the rest of them, no.
Yeah, I think it's more the fact that they were trying to use, like, the early stages of 3D technology, and the early stages of any technology just don't look good.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't even allow up-down aiming in a lot of the early games. It just automatically made your weapon fire higher if the enemy was up there. Things like that. Not the greatest anymore. Fantastic in its day. Not taking anything away from it. You played the shit out of GoldenEye?
Oh yeah. I probably most of us did. That was a great game.
We made it. Hold on.
I would like to talk about Borderlands 3's difficulty tuning.
Dig in and tell me why as well. What to put in the why.
So the way that Borderlands 3's difficulty tuning on higher difficulty levels works is that they start adding mechanics to enemies. which, as we said earlier, uh, it was something that we enjoyed on boss fights. It's something that we've enjoyed on some encounters, but the way that Borderlands 3 does it can be very, very annoying. In as much as there are combinations of modifiers that can make a enemy virtually unkillable, because you have different health bars in Borderlands. You have armor bar, you have health bar, and you have shield bar. And there's a modifier that increases the amounts of those enemies that the game throws at you. There's also a modifier that makes it so that if you don't do uh, if you don't do any sort of specific elemental damage to deal with those different health bars, then you're doing basically zero damage. And then that combined with another modifier that adds additional health to each of those pools when they're already, over leveled based on the player level, makes it just virtually impossible to kill some of the enemies. It just takes forever. It feels bad. And then another game session, because these modifiers are loaded per game session. If you just quit and load back in, you might get a different set of modifiers that makes everything extremely easy to kill. They just deal more damage to you and it's fine.
Summarize that for you?
Yeah. I think that sums it up pretty well. And the enemy modifiers being RNG just drives me crazy.
That one deserves a way.
Yeah.
Pseudo, what's your least favorite Outer Worlds you put up? Unless you want to put up a good one. You don't have to hate on everything.
But it's so much easier to hate things.
It's cool to hate.
I think it's good. Trying to think of recent. Some fantastic difficult, but a lot of games that can do it well because it's fairly straightforward to do is racing games. It's usually pretty easy to adjust difficulty for that, since that kind of falls on a bit AI, but also just like kind of maxing out on speed and stuff like that, as well as like actual control of the car when we start playing some of the other games. Like the car will basically, on the easier difficulties, will drive itself, and then on the harder difficulties, now you're kind of more responsible for
that's
what's going on, and start paying attention to the actual physics of the car, and you can't just be doing like 90 and being like, I want to turn left now.
Yeah,
as well as the stuff like the guided lines and stuff like that are also pretty cool, where it'll actually show you where you need to be and when you need to start braking and when you need to start accelerating and stuff like that.
For sure. Are there any specific racing examples you'd like up there?
Project Cars, I believe, covers most of that.
Yeah, Project Cars was actually really well tuned.
Beautifully designed and engineered too. They really went in depth on it. It's a great sim. I threw Battlefield 2 up there as well, from Cruci. And he brings up some really interesting ideas there, like enabling friendly fire, higher difficulty, getting rid of the GUI. And I think those fall under the player assistance that I added when Pseudo was talking about the cars turning. Actually, you know what? I'm going to add... specifically 2 is what I'm thinking of. At higher difficulties, started disabling your auto aim, things like that, so that you'd have to be closer, more spot on with your shooting. You get less snap to... Hey, Chels, welcome to the stream. We've already spent a bunch of time talking about different Dark Souls tuning, but if you want us to talk about any of that, happy to reassess some of it. I know you're a big fan. Hello.
See, I'm not sure. I'm not sure how I feel about having any auto aim at all in a video game. As somebody who has played a lot of very difficult hardcore shooters, I can't do it.
Well, of course you don't want it. You want the hard difficulty. But
just stop messing with my input. When I click on a head, I expect that head to blow up.
I fully understand and agree. And like anything, it can be implemented poorly. Any of the good mechanics still have to be implemented well, or they become bad.
Yeah, totally
So
agree.
we have a disclaimer. Everything we're talking about requires proper implementation. You can't just take a crap in a box and call it an enemy AI and say, look, we've adjusted the enemy AI. That doesn't work. That's not a good adjustment, but it can be done well. The player assistance can be as well. Just Cause was basically, you have to be close to the thing, fairly close, maybe a little bit closer now, like in your actual reticle aiming, and the assistance was almost necessary to play the game with a controller, especially.
I mean, if you're playing with a controller, you're doing it wrong.
Um, unless you're playing the third one, at which point controller was almost mandatory for some things, like the wingsuit and stuff like that.
I haven't checked out Just Cause 3 yet.
Don't
Is it
don't do
is it worth it?
Don't do it. Don't do it.
Okay.
Don't do it to yourself. Just remember that Just Cause 2 is great.
Yeah.
That.
Just Cause 2 was a fantastic game.
If anybody that's watching has not played Just Cause 2 and you want to kill a weekend and just murder things and blow stuff up, Just Cause 2. Fantastic game. Can't go wrong. It's like $5-10 now. Strongly recommend.
Totally agree.
Pseudo, you get to play Just Cause 2?
Yeah, I've played a lot of Just Cause 2. I haven't done 3 so much, but I've played a decent amount of 2.
But I can talk about 2 to 3 a little bit here. I would like to touch on it for you too, because it's maybe not the difficulty, but they still managed to simultaneously make the game easier and more frustrating at the same time. And it just... I'm just thinking about it, I'm like, oh no. Pressure points, just relax, don't. So, one of the wonderful things about 2 is the power-ups scattered everywhere in the world, right? Exploring all over the place, finding these wonderful things. So they've taken the power-ups, and they've now put them into these little challenge mini-games. I don't like difficulty things like going blind, screens going black. Yeah, I'm with you. Although, when used sparingly, still effective, but not the most interesting. But
yeah, I would say any mechanic that interferes with player input is a bad mechanic.
Yeah. Yeah, so they've taken away the world exploring aspect, which was grand, and turned it into this little challenge where it's basically just memorizing what's going on, figuring out the little details, doing it over and over again sometimes to learn where the things are and have your little route. Because if you want to 5-star it and get really everything you can get out of it, you have to do it perfectly. Perfectly. And it's very scripted stuff. And then when you get into the steering on some of the vehicles was just horrendous. I hope they fixed it. If anybody's played it more recently and can say that they fixed it, please say so. But like, you get on a bike where you have to do a race for this bike, and honestly the bike's handling was so bad that every time I saw an event that needed to use the bike, I was just like, okay, I'm not doing that one. I found one that I did do because I stole someone's dune buggy. And at the same time, the combat was easier. Like, I breezed through the game. I didn't have a hard time killing anything like I did in the second one, where I have to actually consider my approach and do this. But at the same time, I was constantly frustrated by everything happening in the game, making me have to do everything perfectly, or I don't get my 1 extra star, 2 extra star here and there. And the control on the vehicles and the suits was just picky. You go ahead.
Just not well done.
Yeah, I've done my Just Cause 3. Go ahead.
So, Crucy brought up an interesting point in that interfering with player input with justification in the in-game world is something that has been done a bunch in video games. In his example, the player character being drunk and trying to shoot a gun. That is something that I think is fine for a set piece. It's something that's fine, that's used extremely sparingly, and they're not expecting you to actually deal with the other mechanics of the game that way. But in my opinion, there's nothing more frustrating than having your agency in a video game taken away from you. For instance, the most egregious recent example that I can think of is Mei in Overwatch. Like the fact that she just takes your ability to play the game away. That's just not fun.
Yeah,
That
it's a
is
bad
not fun at
interactive
all.
mechanic. Very bad interactive mechanic. We can also look at Blue in Magic the Gathering.
And I mean,
Come
there's
on.
those are a lot of people who love to play Blue.
Yeah, the
And
people who
that's
like to have fun by
fine, I
themselves.
If you want to play solitaire, then sure, but just go play solitaire.
Yeah, you don't need me for you to play it.
The the taking away of interactivity in a video game is almost never good.
My
There's
oh,
I just can't think of a reason why you would ever want to do that.
yeah, my number one that comes to mind when we're talking about removing a player's ability to interact with the game is Monster Hunter World.
Yeah. Yeah.
Some of those bosses are just like, yeah, cool. I've spent most of this fight stunned and or staggered and or unable to move, and yeah, sure, once you know the boss and you're well prepared and you bring all the items, suddenly it's a cakewalk and it's so easy. But the first few times you have to fight it are just a terrible fight. Terrible fight. I didn't enjoy it at all. I had no fun. I was just frustrated and like, I don't want to do this. This sucks. Let's just call some friends.
Yeah, and that was an experience that you and I shared when we were taking on some of the later game bosses, because they would stun lock you for a long enough period of time that they could get their next attack off, which would then one shot you. So have fun.
Yep. Or anybody that's played MMOs has also experienced this. Being stun locked until you're dead in PvP is not a fun experience. It's just not. It's not cool. It's not interesting. Find a better way to do it. What's a better way to do it? Diminishing returns a good example, or a good solution.
Yeah, I've seen, and that's a mechanic that I have seen in MMOs specifically several times, in that if like every time you stun a character, your stun gets less effective. Something like that.
Yes, but their real life pain is fun for me. Yeah. I mean, when you're the one playing Blue, when you're the one doing the stun locking, yeah, the game is fun, but it's not fun for anyone else. So while it may be fun for that one person, it's not a good design for a game. From a game designer's standpoint, everybody should be enjoying combat. Even if you're getting your ass kicked, you should know why you're getting your ass kicked, know what you should have done in response. That's the biggest thing about stun locking is there's nothing you could have done. I died, and there's no reason for me to. There's no way I could have not died because there's nothing I did wrong. I did everything perfectly, but here I am dead.
Yeah, and it's something you see in fighting games as well, quite a bit, especially if they include juggle combos. In that you make one tiny mistake and suddenly your entire health bar is gone. Like it was a big problem with Evil Ryu in Street Fighter 4, in that while he was an incredibly difficult character to play and he had very low health and very tight timings, if you were good enough to do it and your opponent was at, 80% health, you could just kill him. Just straight up.
Yeah, slight oversight there.
A little bit.
Oh,
Like,
wow.
to be fair, the input windows are like 1 or 2 frames for most of his abilities, which is very, very difficult. But the fact that you can just be like, nope, you're dead now, that's not interactive. That's not fun.
Yeah, you're a fighting game fan. You want to add a few fighting games to the list? Maybe one on each side. Pseudo, I don't know if you've played many for fighting games. I know you're a big Super Smash fan.
Yeah, mostly just Smash Bros. Is what I play.
I think fighting games are difficult to put on either side of the fence because it's so dependent on character versus character balance. Realistically, you play the campaign mode once, and then you never touch it again.
So basically, they're neither good nor bad tuned because it doesn't matter if they're tuned or not because it's all about the multiplayer and only about the multiplayer.
Yeah, the focus is so much on uh, on player versus player interaction that the difficulty tuning of the game is not so important, and it's more about the character balance.
Well, we can touch on PvP tuning at the same time. They're fairly related topics. I think it would be interesting still.
Sure. Yeah, just if Pseudo had something that he wanted to add about Smash, let's give him a chance to jump in.
For sure.
Sure. Yeah. Even though it's still player versus player, there are still certain things that will happen difficulty-wise that'll change. You can just look at a lot of things like tier lists and stuff like that, and Smash isn't always really the best example for fighting games. It's kind of in its own little realm of it's more kind of casual than a lot of the actual like 1v1 fighting games are. But there's things in there like whenever Nintendo's a bad habit, or it's probably mostly intentional because it sells, is when they release a DLC character, they are very broken. And the one I remember the most was Bayonetta, because when she came out, she was one of the first characters that could just fucking infinitely juggle you in the air. And then it was the thing like, oh, I'm being juggled, so like I guess I'll just go like get a snack or something, and I'll eventually just die and I'll come back. And then they started introducing some zero to deaths combos, which are like you can avoid them, but as soon as you're into it and you don't really know what you're doing, you're just gonna get kind of wrecked. And then it's one of those things where it's like, hey, yeah, there's always been like a lot of combos games, but when they start getting this kind of ridiculous and like the arrow windows are so small to avoid them that it gets really frustrating because all the character ends up doing is just trying to get that combo on you over and over and over again, and all you're trying to do is avoid it, and it's just this cat and mouse game of like we're not even really fighting anymore. We're basically just like running around, jumping around, trying to avoid each other because you're going to hit me once with your up B, and then I'm just dead. So that's all I have to say for the difficulty for that game.
It sounds to me like they were attempting to implement more of a skill mechanic to the game. But
most of the characters have their own skill mechanics now, and their own kind of their range of actual mechanics from character to character now very different now, especially since they added like Ryu and the Street Fighter characters, and now Terry and such as well, where like they play almost completely different, which is it's actually very closely melded together and stuff like that. It's just that then you get those issues where you have like, you know, a big heavy guy such as like Donkey Kong, and now you're playing someone who's like a lot of aerial juggling. It's like, well, there's just nothing you can do. The moment you're in the air, you're such a big target that you can't get out of the way. You're just gonna get juggled nonstop, and like as soon as it starts, you're just gonna like, okay, well, hopefully I get back on the ground sometime, but probably not, because the moment I start coming back to a platform, I'm just gonna get juggled up again and hit around. So
yeah, you're relying on them making a mistake so you can get some hits in at that point, and then you're going to need the damage on a character like Donkey Kong to be tuned very, very high in order to be able to compete.
Yeah, they've done a fairly good job tuning wise. It's just now we're getting to the point where the roster is just so huge that it's almost impossible to keep everything tuned, and there's going to be certain matchups where it's like, yep, you're playing this character against this character, even if you're like a whole lot better, it's not going to matter that much.
Yeah, it's not looking good for you. I think that applies, that sort of a feel and setup works better in a MMO PvP system.
Much or at least something that is team-based, like Overwatch. Like,
yeah.
A lot of the instances there, single character versus single character, one will win 8 times out of 10, but in team combinations, the situation can totally be reversed.
Yeah, absolutely. I do love a good team fight game. Love team strategy. It's totally okay to have one person completely obliterate another person then, because it's about the makeup of the team.
Which is, you know, as much as it is down to personal taste, I'm just not as big a fan of. Oh, we're a different Discord window now.
Yeah, switched it back. Somebody sent me a message, I had to check it.
But yeah, the way that things are handled in specifically fighting games, I would say, is more about game balance than it is difficulty tuning.
I just thought of a really interesting example. I'm going to throw it up under well done. I'm going to talk a little bit about this game. How many people are familiar with the game Alundra? First, it was a PlayStation 1 Zelda clone. Anybody know this game? No? Nobody's familiar? Aw, that's unfortunate.
You're literally the only one.
It was a great little Zelda clone. Let me throw up some video of it while I talk about it here. Oh, and it was done by Working Design, which is even cooler. They brought a lot of great games over here. Whoa, you're way too loud. Hold on, man. Dig into the gameplay. There we go. It was like a little puzzle, Zelda kind of exploring around. You're this little elf that can jump into people's dreams and explore their dream. And once you're in their dream, you go and find the boss in there that's haunting them and making them ill or keeping them asleep and freeing people from this. And I didn't so much have difficulties, but at the very, very end of the game, there's a statue with a little note under it about it containing the sword it has being this great, fantastic sword. And then rumors started going around about some people had that sword. The statue gave it to them, and it one-shots the last boss. People wanted to know how the hell to get this sword for a long time. Well, it turns out this game actually tracks metrics while you're playing to determine how good you are at the game. If you're really struggling through this game, it knows. It's actually paid attention. And when you get to the end, if you're sufficiently bad at the game, it will give you the sword to help you with the last boss. Because he's actually pretty tough. I thought it was so creative to work this difficulty fix right into the game's story and lore like that.
Yeah, I think that that is a very, very cool thing. I think that it's something that really should be included in more games because it's an organic way to tune difficulty for your player.
Yeah. So, I don't even know who developed this game, but to that development team, good job. I hope you guys are still around doing something, somewhere. That was really creative. I really liked it.
Yeah, I think that would be great. I think more games should do that.
Yeah. Welcome, Grey Wolf. Hope you've had a good day so far. Are there any games you would like to throw up? We're talking about difficulty tuning. So if you can think of any games where you played it on easy and it was just like, this is terrible, so you turned it up and it was better, that's what we want to hear about. You're afraid of 1080p me? That's just too much me? There's no such thing as too much me. Come on.
Just
yeah.
Too many pixels for your internet connection.
You'll try to think of some. Pseudo.
Let's see here.
We've got so much good. This has just been a good fest. Let's just shit on some games for a while. I always like shitting on games. There's lots of bad games to shit on. Can't think of many.
What about some of the classics? I think it was Cheetahman 2 on the Amiga. That was literally unbeatable. You couldn't do it.
Was that an Action 52 as well? Or like big old dumpster of 52 shitty games compiled into one super shitty game?
Actually, you know what? That's an interesting point. Difficulty tuning doesn't mean it has to have different difficulty levels.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm actually going to throw up a really, really famous one that everybody knows because it's notoriously hard for bad reasons. That game was bullshit. Also the only game I was ever banned from playing as a kid. There was an incident with an SNES controller bouncing off of a TV and landing somewhere in the kitchen while dinner was being cooked, and that was the end of that game.
Yeah.
Yeah, let me guess. You got down the end of that spiral, finally figuring out the mechanics as you did it, getting a little better, got to the speeders, and threw your TV out the window. Right? Dance Dance Revolution has poor difficulty. I don't like to be limited by my physique. Yeah. So, do you know what actually made that speeder level so terrible? And the math has been done on the game. You can look into this. The NES, which is what it was on, early days, only had very limited memory. That's why if you're playing something like Mega Man and you run an enemy off the screen and then try to find it again, it's gone. Because as soon as it's not on the screen, they don't have the memory to maintain it anymore. It's been deleted and they need to instantiate a new one when they want to put a new one on screen. That was the only way they could make the games live on those little cartridges. Tiny memory that had to load it all. So your speeder bikes are now moving so fast, and they only have so much space to draw these pixels with the limited resolution, that after the barrier loaded, if you were not already out of the way, it was too late to get out of the way. You actually had to memorize the pattern of everything if you wanted to get through it, and that's the only way to do it. You have to know what's coming before it comes. And it was just a long memorization section in a game about reactions. No. Terrible. Terrible design. Otherwise, I really liked the game. It was a lot of fun. I had a great time. It took me a long time to get through all those first little bits, but yep, that is exactly what has happened to the new MMOs. No, it's nothing like Dark Souls. I one-shot Gwyn. I didn't even get hit by him my first time. I didn't need to memorize anything. I just saw a big sword coming at me, timed the parry with the known parry window that I was aware of, and managed to parry him over and over and over again.
And then you were like, oh, sweet, you can parry this boss, and then just murdered him.
Yep, pretty much. I mean, he was a humanoid with a sword. I was like, I'm going to parry. Hey, it worked. And disclaimer, I did actually get hit once on my first Gwyn attempt, because I stopped attacking him and just started rolling through the attacks for a while, laughing hysterically, calling Pookie over, and she took her time getting over in order to see what happened, and while I was laughing so hysterically, I took a poke. But just one. And then I killed him.
The one.
Just the one, and then I killed him. I could have killed him before that, but I was toying with him for too long. Like a cat with its prey.
Do you know that they're making a new Battletoads?
I hope it's better than the last one.
Oh, I hope they don't ruin
it. It
it.
Different, but I don't know. It could go one of two ways from what I've seen. It might be like a Castle Crashers kind of like game, but I know they are just remaking it.
But yeah, on the memorization with E4S, that's one of the things I'm really sad to see happening to the raids and MMOs with 14. It's a very, very, very consistent, scripted, 100% the same every time encounter now. Where it used to be responding to events. Enemies are doing things, casts are on different levels, sometimes they'll line up, sometimes they won't. Some are every percentage, some are about every time, some are randomly done, and you just have to be paying attention and be able to react as a group. Now it's down to the point of, oh, I forgot I was supposed to be standing at this point in this second. I died. It's still fun and interesting, but I don't find it as engaging. It's just watch the video, memorize the video, and do the content. Yeah, so we can talk on that a little bit for you, Grey Wolf, because I don't want you to get the wrong idea. Survival mechanics are cool, and they can be done really, really, really well, but to make a survival mechanic get added into a game, just because I've set it at a higher difficulty level, that's not making the game harder or easier. That's changing the genre. It's changing the enjoyment of the game. Some people like survival games, some people don't. Some like shooter games, some people don't. We were saying, don't put it in this way. Put it in as a toggle. Give it as an option for any difficulty, so that if I want a hard or easy survival game, I can. Or I can have a hard or easy RPG action exploration game without having to worry about all the survival. And you make it a lot better game. Instantly, it's a better game. And everything is already there. It's just they needed to recode a couple flags. Yeah.
Yeah, we're not against survival mechanics. I mean, I personally don't like them, but I know that there are a lot of people are, and that's totally fine.
Yeah. Yeah,
Just
I'm
give
happy if
them
you're
the
happy.
ability to enjoy that on any difficulty.
Yeah, I'm one who actually likes survival mechanics in some games. I did not mind them in New Vegas. I don't think they were done like super great in New Vegas, but I didn't mind them too much there. There was less of a hindrance. I did like the long dark. I think that one did it really well because it kind of integrated the actual mechanic itself into the point of the game, not so much as an afterthought. It was designed around it. I'm trying to think of some other games. I can't remember the name of it. Don't Starve. Don't Starve also does it
Yep,
very well.
Don't Starve
That's a
does it really
fantastic
well.
survival game. Pookie and I played Don't Starve together for a while. It wasn't the game we expected. We were looking for a more long-winded building things up and developing things together game at the time. So we didn't play it for a long time because it's more of a rogue-like, let's see how long we can survive. Woo, 10 minutes. Okay, let's try to survive again.
I also love calling The Sims a survival game.
I mean, it kind of is.
You're not
They're
wrong.
literally trying to keep your guy alive.
You're
Stats are
not
like, they'll
wrong.
die.
You are not wrong.
It's just way too real. The whole you need to eat and sleep.
Yeah, no, I'm personally not a huge fan of survival mechanics. Pookie and I did greatly enjoy Outward together, though, for the limited life.
What about RimWorld and Dwarf Fortress kind of games, where they're kind of survival, but it's more like management? And I guess we can also branch into RTS games, and they're different.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about some difficulty tuning in RTS games. That was definitely something I wanted to touch on. We can probably finish off the last half hour just with RTS because there's so much cool stuff to do in RTS. Starting with, say, StarCraft. Like,
Oh boy. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy.
go ahead,
That's
Rich.
my game.
Go ahead. I'm going to disappear off the side of the camera for a second. So pay no attention to the man behind the curtain.
Or in this case, behind the webcam. So, StarCraft is a game that a lot of people will call an RTS game in that you are applying strategy in real time. I would say that that is a bit of a misnomer. It is a busy work engine that has a tactical game attached to it. So, one of the ways that or one of the reasons that the original StarCraft and StarCraft Brood War were considered to be difficult games is because there was so much to do. You had to manage so many things at once. And the reason that that is the way it is because on PC, you could only select up to 12 units at a time. And you could only assign so many hotkeys to different groups of units. So it made large scale engagements with large armies very difficult. You had to have great mechanical skill and great dexterity to be able to select units and have them follow your orders in the right timing. Pulling back individual units to get them healed and let other units tank for them on the front lines, for instance. There was also a great deal of micromanagement that had to go on to keep your army being built at a steady rate, your macro, as it were. You had to individually go to each building, click on it, press the hotkey to build the unit that you wanted to build, and then repeat that for each of your production structures, including your workers. So it ended up just being this game that required you to play very, very quickly to play at a high level. And it ended up being one of the games that is famous for having one of the highest skill ceilings in all of gaming. StarCraft 2 approached it in a very different way. It came at it from a perspective of let's make a lower barrier to entry. It started allowing you to hotkey buildings, for instance. And not only could you hotkey buildings, you could hotkey groups of buildings. So you could press, 6, for instance, and select all of your barracks, and then spam the A button to start building Marines. and it would evenly distribute your marine builds over all of your barracks, and they would all pop out at roughly the same time. And it was something that really lowered the barrier to entry for StarCraft 2, but it also lowered the skill ceiling for StarCraft 2, which is something that affects, perceived difficulty, even though it hasn't actually changed any of the mechanics. They've just changed the way that you can interact with the game.
Yeah. But, I mean, there's just so many ways to approach that game. Because there's also unit on unit superiority.
Yep. Individual combat balancing, which unit you want to use in which situation against which other unit. High ground mechanics. Yeah, that was a thing in Brood War. It's no longer a thing in StarCraft 2 in as much as you no longer miss when you're shooting up ramp.
But it's still the visual superiority. Being able to fire at them or not. Crucy and I, when we were doing a lot of SC2 beta together, were just mauling people by working as a pair, and his army would be chasing my army, so I'd run them through the valley where Yannick or Crucy's up on the top, just blasting down at them. They can't shoot back up. I'm running through until they finally figure out what's happening, so then they go after Crucy's army, so then he starts kiting and runs them through the valley while I run up to the top and start blasting at them for the top. We just went back and forth doing this, and they left, I think. I think they just left that game after a while.
Yeah, and totally. And it's that actually brings up a really interesting point, because one could argue that the way that it was in StarCraft 1, where if you were shooting up an elevation, even if you had vision, you still had, I think it was a 25% chance to miss. You could just not deal any damage. And I would say that that is a very bad way to add difficulty versus the way that it's handled in StarCraft 2, where as long as you have vision, you're going to hit your target.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it's not the place for RNG. This is a very competitive game now. It's very tuned for the player versus the player, and you need to stop with the RNG to allow for player skill to rule.
Yeah,
one of the few games I like to watch.
Oh, the skill displayed by professional StarCraft players is something else, man. They are incredible gamers.
That's where the enemy AI comes in. And if you haven't been to our Discord, join our Discord down there. It's growing. I've got some channels coming and adding, so go ahead, pop suggestions in, send me messages if you really want to see things on there. But there is a really cool video about creating AIs by training AIs against each other. And just letting them compete against each other over and over and over and over again and come up with new strategies. Super interesting. Wrongly recommend you watch it. Not feasible to do in games right now, but that's the future of difficulty. Future of difficulty is how many rounds have my AI already played. There's a button to join Discord right below the video.
That's really something that I find interesting, is the application of AI in video games, because there will be a point, which has already been reached in StarCraft 2, where human players cannot beat the AI. They can't do it. And it's not because the AI is cheating, because StarCraft 2, the stock AI in StarCraft 2 is on the highest difficulty cheating, and it is possible to beat 7 impossible difficulty AIs as one player in StarCraft 2. It is doable, and they're not like, even though they can in theory issue orders to as many units as they want, having an AI that plays with the same restrictions as a player character, a human player, and is just fast enough and clean enough and makes good enough decisions, is something that is has just recently been achieved, that AIs are now dominant in StarCraft 2, despite the fact that it's a game that is so very much fueled by creativity, much like chess or Go. Like AlphaMind, I think it was, recently beat the world Go champion.
Just so people understand what we just said. We just said that AIs are infinitely superior to humans at war.
They are now.
No.
They didn't used to be.
No, not
They used
anymore.
to be
But
just a big old pile of if statements.
now they are. They have learned. We taught them how to learn, and now we can't beat them. That is actually what has happened. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the
That shut everyone
implications are
up.
scary.
There's a really good book on the topic called Superintelligence. It's not too technical, but it goes through the kind of point in time we're at right now, which is what they're calling before the intelligence supernova, where we're getting to the point where once we get an AI that can make smarter AIs, it's just going to explode. And it can go basically one of two ways. It'd be like, wow, super cool, everything's super smart now, or oh my god, they took over and we're dead. But it's a really good book, and if you're interested in AIs, I suggest anyone to read it.
Yeah. The hope is that infinite intelligence comes with an understanding that there's no need for violence. Probably not how it's going to work out, though. It's just going to be the most efficient way is to just wipe them out.
Yeah, there's a I think it was actually by Asimov, a short story that I read just recently, that was about an AI that was developed to make greeting cards. And it's so focused on greeting cards, and it's just finding better ways to make greeting cards. It starts using better card stock. It starts going, oh hey, well, if there's two of me, then I can make twice as many greeting cards. So, it starts replicating, starts making more machines to be able to make more gift cards, to be able to make them faster. It starts developing new ways to cut down trees more efficiently so that it can make more cards, to make better gift cards, to make more of them. And this just keeps progressing and progressing, and suddenly it realizes, these whole humans, they're like getting in the way of me making better gift cards. I need to make better gift cards. So it just kills us off. There's nothing malicious about it. It's
Nope. Just the natural
wanted to
conclusion
make better
of the
gift
logical
cards.
decision. Yep. Yep. That's what the 3 laws were for. Yep. I'm the one who caught that. Is that in Brood Wars 2 or Borderlands 2? We were playing when I caught that.
Yeah, we were mowing down some of the loaders, and the AI was there to try and destroy us, and you're just like, well, I guess the first law's out the window.
No, actually, I heard one of them say, disabling first law.
Oh, really? You
Yeah.
got that voice line?
Yeah, one of the
Oh, I
loaders
didn't even
says,
know that was in the
disabling
game.
first law.
Gosh, Borderlands 2 is great. And like, as much as I've enjoyed Borderlands 3, it is not a patch on Borderlands 2.
No, Borderlands 2 is superior going back and playing it. Though I do miss the sliding. I like the
Although
control.
the sliding was also kind of bullshit. Like
The slide
the
speed mod was
that we
bullshit.
got.
Yeah, stop screwing with our speed and stuff like that too. It just breaks the game. So StarCraft difficulty tuning, was it actually well done?
I would say overall it was extremely well done. And it was done by a way of giving the player more to do, more to deal with, to make it more difficult, rather than changing values on anything.
Yeah, I agree. The RTS are simultaneously the hardest and the easiest to do difficulty. That makes sense.
Yep.
They're the easiest in the sense that you don't need to resort to the typical bad habits that everyone resorts to in most games. Let's pump up the enemy's health and make them take more to kill. Because it's easier to go wide. And just put more, okay, well, we'll just make things faster. We'll have more units. And that's an easy way to do it. But tuning that and keeping it within the realms of what a human could actually do in order to make it competitive for a human is a very difficult thing and takes a lot of fine effort.
Yeah, for sure.
Judo, have you played much for RTS? Other than when I wrecked you back when you were a kid?
It's mostly just StarCraft and stuff. I played a lot of other ones, but they're not too much online. I'm trying to remember more of the resource-heavy ones that can get very interesting, such as like Crusader Kings and stuff, because they have very interesting difficulty tuning.
Yeah, I didn't play much of them. How did that one work?
From what I remember, I haven't played a whole lot of the second one, but I know a lot of the memes and stuff that are made from them are basically like, oh, I'm going to attack this place, but then didn't realize all the rivers and forests that were along the way, and then now your army is basically just bogged down and can't cross, and now you're in like terrible, terrible, terrible positioning overall, and then you're just getting kind of like the floor mopped up with you versus like how Civilization does it, where it's like, oh, you get like a stat minus rather than like an entire um, like army is just going to get wiped out instead of just no, you get like one less dice roll.
One less dice roll?
Kind of like under the hood kind of thing, right? Where like Civ is basically just like when you're attacking, it's like not so much.
Oh,
Like you basically like you.
I see. You have less units in the stack, so you have one less attack roll.
Yeah, it's kind of like what it appears to be like when you actually attack. It's like your attack power is slightly less, whereas the games like Crusader Kings really like it breaks it all down, and like if you're attacking in water, it's really going to be like a really really rough time, such as like supply lines and all this other stuff.
Yeah, that's a good comparison. That's basically 4X, where we're merging into now.
Yeah.
And 4X is very RTS similar, but it's just TBS. It's literally just turn-based, large strategy. But then they make it grander scale. If nobody's played 4X's, if you like a long, patient game, it's your game. They're good. I recommend Master of Orion 2 if it's just something you want to try and dabble in. It's simple, it's elegant, easy to pick up and play, but it's still very diverse. Very good game. One of the best ever made.
Well, why don't you take a stab into that one?
Yep.
I need to step away for just one moment, and I will be right back.
No worries. I mean the difficulty tuning in that is very, very similar to what you find in StarCraft. You're not going to get changes in health values. It's all about building speed, building efficiency. How many buildings will the enemy build per how many turns? How many ships will the enemy build per how many turns? And how aggressive are they? Harder difficulty early on in the game. You'll have fairly large ships already lurking around, and they also had a mechanic of negative random events, and you would expect a lot of games you turn up the difficulty and the negative random events increase, but as we were talking about before with an added mechanic, instead of adding mechanics with difficulty, they put it in a toggle so you could include it or disclude it into a game not tied to the difficulty.
To answer Grey Wolf's question, he brought up what do you guys think about the difficulty in sports games such as NBA 2K and MLB The Show?
Okay.
I've played a little bit of NBA 2K, but I have played a bunch of other sports games such as like the Madden series and like NHL games. And I know with NHL games, like it's actually done fairly well. So like on Rookie, you're basically just like your opponents don't really know what's going on, which is fair because you yourself don't really know what's going on, and the game is very casual. But when you actually crank it up to like the pro and high pro, especially with the later games, the newer games, they actually run like plays that are like fairly complicated, and it's actually like you have to sit back and kind of think about what's going on and what like the team's actually going to do with you. And then especially with games like Madden, because EA has like the amount of stat nerds they have there is fantastic, and their simulations for like game outcomes is pretty high. And they like when you play Madden in the game, they actually tell you like the percentage of times that this play is successful given the current scenario. And when you crank up the difficulty, that's what the AI uses against you. It still uses the real world plays. It still uses the real stats of the real world players. It just picks better plays against you. And it's very interesting to see. And it's really cool to go up a level and be like, okay, well now this they basically just know what I'm doing before I even know what I'm doing. And stuff like that. You'll start getting picked off sooner. The blitzes are just like brutal. But I think if done well, they have the possibility to be really, really interesting. Or there's other sports games that kind of just do it terribly. One that I know is like some of the fighting games and UFC games. They just kind of handicap you, or they just artificially make your opponent stronger or have more stamina, which would be a bad way to kind of adjust those tunings.
Yeah, that all falls under the too much enemy health. Just artificially inflating numbers does not make a game feel good. Doesn't make it harder.
It's very frustrating. It doesn't. Because you can just feel the artificialness, right? Like it's not like I'm getting better. It's just that like it just takes longer.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. We may have beat this to death a little early. But I think we really broke it down well. Is there any questions about anything from anyone? Endless Legend is the best 4X, you think, Crucy? Why?
While Crucy is typing out their reasoning, I know quite a few people, well, a couple of people have brought up sports games as well, and I don't know if any of us have enough experience with sports games specifically to
Pseudo dug into that quite a bit while you were away.
Oh, did we?
Yeah. Yeah, Pseudo played quite a few.
Yeah, to quickly recap it, I brought up how like NHL games they can like tune the actual like enemy player mechanics fairly well, so they actually like pass on the spot and shoot on the spot pretty good. But the really cool ones are games like Madden, where EA has all the stats, they crunch all the numbers, and then basically depending on your difficulty setting, it knows which plays to choose. Because if you put your difficulty settings down, it actually tells you like, hey, you're like third and long against this team. This play is successful 75% of the time. And then when you turn the difficulty settings, the enemy teams just do the same thing. They know how to pick the correct plays. And it's kind of just crazy to see.
Very interesting.
Yeah, in similar, he talked about in the hockey games, which I've played. When I play sports games, it's always hockey games too. And you'll see as you turn it up higher, yeah, it's not that players are skating faster. Their shots will be more accurate, which is, part of that. And then you'll see more complex plays, where there'll be 2, 3, 4 passes involved, or set skating patterns in order to draw attention away from areas. Pass to the open man, drop men in on the back. You get a lot sneakier plays written into it that can be triggered on the higher difficulties. Whereas on the lower difficulty, you just get people skating around, and the guy will try to carry the puck up the ice and let you kind of skate at him and check him. Looks like a Pee-wee game with a puck going around and 10 people fall chasing it around. Multiple limits. Each race has special characteristics and mechanics. I do find them quite individual. I agree. The beauty of all 4X games is customization of your race, but 4X kind of provides a path to your customization that yields a more effective empire. Yeah, so basically you're saying they're all unique and individual and different, but that unique and individual and differentness actually can be used to create a powerful empire that benefits from that difference. That's a good way to put it. I've played a fair bit of that too, and yeah, it's one of my top for sure in the 4X field. More expensive though. If they've never played one before, I recommended Moo 2 because it's just like $4 on GOG.com, something like that. Cheap and easy to jump in with. GOG.com is a great site, by the way. Nobody knows that one.
Yeah, if you don't know GOG, go check it out. They're wonderful. They're run by CD Projekt Red, and they do wonderful sales on old games that are difficult to get running on modern systems, and they will put on all that work for you. If they need to, they'll get the emulation set up in DOSBox or older versions of Windows, and they do a fantastic job. And all of their games are DRM free, so you can play them forever.
I was going to point that out, but I'm glad you hit it at the end.
I will always shill for GOG. They're a fantastic site.
Yeah, I love them. If I want to buy a game, I can't get it on Steam, I try to get it through them. Otherwise, I go Steam first. You go where your library already is.
Yeah, I would. You know, I don't check GOG's store enough.
Yep.
I don't know that their library is as big as I want it to be, but
mostly older games.
It's a great project. It's an absolutely wonderful project.
It is. If you ever like, if there's that old childhood game that used to play on old DOSBox or whatnot, and it doesn't run anymore, their virtual DOSBox will run it, and they've probably got it in their library. Their old library is pretty good. Command Modern Operations kind of turns me on, and I want to play it. I don't know that one. Is it a... Let me see.
I'm just browsing GOG now.
So first off, this
Oh, they do have some more up-to-date titles in
So
here
it's
as
like
well now.
jumping into this one.
modern day,
Keyboard shortcuts, the
current war tech.
Also,
Or
if you've
X.
played the game before, you know one of the coolest things about the game is the database.
Military simulator.
2,000 hours. I say I've spent a pretty large portion of that.
Why does that put asterisk on your screen?
They have every
Why did what
aircraft,
put asterisk on your screen?
submarine, every ship, every tank, land vehicle, surface-to-air missile system, and then all.
You mean the one at the beginning of the button, the two at the end of the kind of?
We looked up the Patriot. Right now I'm under weapons, so it'll show me the actual weapon. I can find the Pack 2 gem. It'll have a whole description about it. It'll talk about the range of it, so 2 to 50 or fast. Up here, it'll 6,500, and then see what radar.
I don't want to watch the whole thing. It's pretty long.
Its signatures, which will be, for example, radar cross section, which doesn't necessarily.
That's pretty intricate, though. Setting.
Active and passive sonar range, visual range, infrared range, from front, side, and rear. So where this may come more into play would be if we look at the F-25.
You must
Also, a
have
lot of these do have pictures,
chat
but again,
chat
if
censoring on.
radar cross section,
Yeah,
0,
I think that's only in the apps, though, isn't it?
don't want to do all the
Chat
calculations,
censoring?
fourth root
Or is it
I
in
have
the
no
weapon?
idea.
find out the
Anyway, I'm sure
But
there's a
the,
setting somewhere to get rid of that.
radar here, like the Big Bird, and it
This
will tell you on here.
This is
Game?
pretty
question
hardcore.
mark
Yeah.
that's being played in front of
Limits
us
his operating band.
is interesting.
But when you notice here,
It
it's
is.
calendar mode. Now,
It
this
is
a lot of fun. Technically, it's
an
just
expensive spreadsheet.
because you can put in any units you want. You can add.
So far.
Like, this is even more spreadsheety than Eve.
Difficult. You can battle any two types.
That's what That's what ended up happening to Move 3. Terrible, terrible game. They ended up just getting so intricate into all the money management and taxation and stuff like that. The best summary I ever read of Move 3 in a forum, and it's stuck with me to this day, was Move 3 isn't actually a game. It's actually a piece of foreign alien tax software.
Make it auto.
I think that is pretty accurate.
Say fourth generation Super Hornet and the stealthy F-35.
You like what's going on here?
And both these fly
This
directly
game looks interesting to you?
which one it picks up first,
Hello?
and the difference between the two detections.
I think more that he was wondering what is going on here. 'Cause
Oh,
this
I was like,
did
what
not
is? I thought I read it
initially
as
look
I like
like,
what is. I didn't see the was.
First aircraft.
did not initially look like a video game to me. It looked like a piece of 3D modeling software.
Also in the game, when you click on it here, it'll
Yeah, he's actually tracking
so
a
the
Hornet
detected
jet
4 seconds ago.
off of the coast right now. It's in his radar range.
Contact again with it. The reason for this is the game is actually calculating this radar spinning around. So when it's not pointed south in the the direction.
Interesting, but not at all something I'm even remotely interested in.
Yeah, no, this is not your style of game at all. We've been watching like it's like 5 minutes through the game and nothing's blowing up once. It's not something you're interested in.
I've always been jealous of these like super hardcore strategy games. 'Cause I would never, ever, ever have the attention span to play it. So I feel like I'm missing. You guys are having fun. I want to have fun, but I physically just can't do it. I just couldn't. So I'll always have a little part of me that's like, man, it'd be really cool if I could just, play these games.
Some of them do get kind of cool, but they're not exciting. They're never exciting.
It can be though, right? It depends on, just because there aren't explosions doesn't mean it's not exciting.
Well, there can be
That
some
eventual
turnarounds
explosion
and whatnot,
is a hell of a thing.
Yeah, but I mean, like games like The Sims are still exciting. Not a whole lot really happens. It's still just having people run around, and it's mostly just still like resource management stuff. But it can still get exciting and still achieve certain things, right?
Yeah, it all comes down to what you personally are interested in, right? Like, this sort of game is definitely not for me. However, I can see that there would be other people who would be all in on a game like this, and they would absolutely love
And from what I've seen, it looks like a very well done, well designed, very thorough military simulator, which is really what it is.
When this S300 will actually pick them up, and this is the problem with land-based.
Pretty impressive.
I mean, like,
actually, I'm kind of staggered and blown away by the amount. Like, he was even down in there able to adjust the frequency of his radio communications.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing.
Like, this isn't a guy playing. This is a video of a guy explaining the mechanics of the game, showcasing it, and it's 15 minutes. 15 minutes of just talking about mechanics, and he's not going slow. He's powering through this stuff.
So it looks like that one Tomahawk. Other feature